Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Coffee and Conversation. So this morning, we're super stoked to have Evan Cohen with us. Evan, thank you for being here this morning. I'll do a quick introduction about Evan, and then let him jump into his slides and give us a bit of an overview of SVG Ventures, an investment group out of the Bay Area. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A, and we'll also do some interview style questions after the slides as we wrap up. So Evan, thank you so much for being here. We'll move to the next slide and just do a quick overview of the SVDC and what we do. As most of you know, we're one of 1,000 in the US, but we're the best. Ha! We provide consulting services to our clients. We work with about 500 startups and larger scaling companies every year. We provide a lot of assistance with funding, equity funding, but also loans, and just general business planning, strategy, and then even more detailed consulting focused on digital marketing, prototyping, supply chain management. So any questions, you can reach us at slowsvdc@gmail.com. Next slide, please. And we are sponsored by the SBA and the GoBiz office of California. And we have a sponsor, Maynard Cooper, and a brief message from them this morning.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamal Al-Haj, and I'm a partner with Maynard Cooper & Gale in the firm's San Francisco office. Maynard Cooper is a full-service law firm of national reach with over 300 lawyers across 11 offices coast to coast. Our San Francisco practice focuses on advising emerging growth companies and venture capital firms, including with respect to equity management, financings, employment, and intellectual property matters. We are extremely proud to be a Founder Circle sponsor amongst an extraordinary circle of other dedicated philanthropists who recognize the immense value that Cal Poly's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship bring to the SLO community. We hope that each of you enjoys this upcoming training and workshop and are able to incorporate the knowledge and know-how that will be presented shortly to further help grow, develop, and accelerate your businesses.
Thank you to our sponsor, Mary Cooper. And so quick overview, Evan, thanks again for being here this morning. Super stoked. Evan's had quite the career, and maybe we'll dig into it after your slides, but you've gone from legislative assistant at the White House with 6+ years in the Marine Corps, then some time with the DOE, the Department of Energy. I guess one of the questions I do have for you, we'll get to it later, but I'm guessing that may have triggered your interest in clean tech. And you're currently a manager of the Accelerator program in Agtech for Thrive, a great program that supports Agtech companies and that is being supported by SVG Ventures. So thank you so much for being here with us this morning. I'll let you jump in and do a screen share. And then we'll open it up to questions. And actually, if anyone has questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and then I'll feed them through to Evan. Thank you, Evan. I'll let you jump right in.
Great, thank you. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? That's all, everything's there, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Excited to be here. Love having the opportunity to speak to startup community, innovation ecosystems. We are a venture fund and accelerator based in the Bay Area, but we have a very large number of portfolio companies and current companies in our accelerator that are outside of the Bay Area. So I'm a firm believer of doing things like this and investing in communities outside of the Silicon Valley bubble, and excited to kind of present some ideas today. I'll go through, I'll first kind of tell you a little bit about our fund, our accelerator program, and then I've been asked to share some experiences with VCs and kind of speak generally about what VCs look for, particularly the Bay Area VCs, when they're making investments. So I'll do my best to give you some helpful tips and some good context. I'll say some of it is informed by our fund, but even prior to my role here at this accelerator, I worked at a different accelerator helping international startups fundraise in Silicon Valley. So I've worked with over 100 startups that are thinking about raising early stage money. Has been focused primarily in clean tech and ag tech. So I'll try to a lot of what I'm speaking to is kind of making a bit of a collective lessons learned, not just about our fund, but a bit broad, so that it's as applicable as possible. I'm sure we have kind of startups and companies from a range of backgrounds and focuses on the line today. So again, thank you so much for having me. I am the Accelerator Manager at Thrive, which is an accelerator that is run by SVG Ventures. SVG Ventures is both a VC fund and a corporate innovation platform where we help major corporates onboard and access innovative startups from around the world. You see here, this is a little bit more about us. We have a community of over 5,000 startups and over 100 companies. You can see kind of where we have partners all around the world. You see Cal Poly on there. I'm happy to talk about. We're working with them actually in our current cohort, particularly around some of our animal health startups. It's really exciting stuff, and I think is a testament to how we view the Cal Poly community as a really rich ecosystem.
Quick question for you, Evan. Sorry to jump in right there.
No worries.
So it is very international. Are you, do you run a lot of your programming virtually?
Yeah, this year we do.
Well,
this year and last year. In past years, it's been in person. We traditionally will have a seed camp in Silicon Valley to kind of kick off the cohort. We'll spend a week in both Silicon Valley and down in Salinas, really integrating with some of the farmers and growers in that region.
So your international startups, they would come out here and actually participate in person. Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
exactly. Yeah. And then we spend a few months with them, working with mentors, doing some webinars as they're back running their companies, and then they come back into the region for our demo day at Salinas, the Forbes Thrive Future of Food Summit. It used to be called the Agtech Summit. So we bring them all back, but yes, they usually come in person. I miss doing in-person events. I will say there's nothing quite as contagious as the energy of being in a room full of startups on the first day of a multi-month accelerator. I'm sure that's something you guys can appreciate. So yes, a little bit more about SVG Thrive. According to CrunchBase, we're the most active investor in Agtech. It's something that we really are excited about, a testament to the vision of our founder, John Hartnett, who, back before Agtech was a buzzword, was thinking about how we're investing in Agtech, and which is great. According to AgFunder, which is an industry publication, #1 agri-food accelerator, that's quite the honor. That was designated before I took over the accelerator, so I can. It's not a humble brag. It's it's the testament of my colleagues and the organization, and it's quite the honor to join the organization with its prominence. Over $1 billion of valuation has been created by our portfolio companies and our alumni. That is, I think, super impressive when you think about the early stage that they come on board to our platform. We're targeting kind of seed to Series A. Had some pre-seed companies come through, a lot of them coming through at a $2 million valuation, and collectively have built are valued at over $1 billion, which is amazing. Again, over 100 countries, really a global platform. Of the 12 companies going through our program right now, only 3 are in California. We have companies from Argentina, Australia, Israel, and Nigeria. So really a great global reach. I think startups exist all around the world and throughout California, not just the Bay Area. see some of our partners here. We have a lot of corporate partners. Our accelerator program it focuses on kind of 3 phases: content delivery, access to speakers and market intelligence that would otherwise be really challenging to get. We connect folks to our network and our corporate partners, and then we have commercial results with our Forbes Thrive partnership, which is really exciting, kind of global reach. For those, sad that the image is not coming through, I don't think, on your side, but we have the Thrive Forbes Future Food Summit coming June 30th. It'll be virtual this year, but for those Agtech, food tech companies on the line, would love for you to attend. It's a great program. So with that, don't tell me, can you guys not see my slides?
Shoot. So I can see CVC versus VC.
Yes. Okay. You guys can't see my bullet points, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure why that's happening, but I'm going to wing it a little bit. We'll be a little flexible. I promise there are bullet points there. I can see them on my presenter side, but you guys can't.
Yep. Quick suggestion, if you want to take a second, if you want to go into non-presenter mode, maybe we can see them, even though it won't be as big. Yes. We may be able, there we go. We can totally see them. You can see them. Maybe we'll just Great. Keep that format. Thank you.
Awesome. So I think the first thing, again, I want to make the presentation as applicable as possible, not just about our fund, but kind of VC in general. So, a few things I wanted to touch on were, one, there are kind of 2 groups of venture capitalists. You have CVCs, the corporate venture arms, and then you have some people will call it strategic investors or financial investors. We would fall into that category, which is just kind of the VCs. And some of the differences there are, how we get money. I think when I came to Silicon Valley 5 or 6 years ago now, the one thing that I didn't anticipate is basically everyone's asking someone else for money, right? Startups are asking VCs for money, VCs are asking LPs for money, and that's an important piece. It really plays into the motivation of VCs. If you're a corporate venture arm, you're usually structured in one of 2 ways. You're either like a pure CVC where you're maybe investing off the balance sheet of a large corporate, or sometimes you're set up like a single LP fund. Siemens is like this. They have Next 47, which is the Siemens corporate venture arm, but really it's just a single LP into a fund. They function a little bit more like a
Evan, do some of us, I saw for example, sponsors, does Driscoll have a venture arm? Do any of these big food focused companies have venture arms?
Great question. Definitely, there are ag-focused venture funds. Yamaha, which kind of produces farm equipment, is a partner of ours. We do some deal flow partnerships where we share a lot of large corporates in the ag space. Cavallo Ventures, Tyson Foods has a venture arm, Wilbur Ellis. A number of them definitely have a CVC, and their motivation is different than a strategic or financial investor like us. They are looking for maybe things that support their business units. Some of them are looking for kind of long-term, that whole blockbuster, Netflix, right? They don't want to be taken over by innovation. You can be a big company, and if you're not kind of a part of the revolution kind of can kind of overtake you. So CVCs have a lot of different motives. I'm happy to talk a little bit about how you can utilize CVCs and how you also have to be a little bit wary of CVCs. That's very sector specific, but things to think about if you were to take money from a CVC is, are there any sort of exclusivity agreements, right of first refusal? A strategic investor, a financial investor that wants you to, ideally IPO or be acquired at a large valuation is going to be weary in some ways of certain CVCs. I think that's less true in an industry like energy and ag tech, and a little bit more true when you're coming to like more software plays. I think software investors are a little bit more wary of CVCs. But for me to see like a CVC on a cap table, I see that as a good thing, right? It's an external validator, maybe it's a channel partner. You just want to make sure when you have your investment agreements that you're not doing anything that kind of locks you just into that corporate. So this really can define your investment thesis. We have LPs, whether that's family offices or large agricultural companies, and we have derived a thesis around what we invest in. That thesis is a stage, it's a sector, it's a type of technology, and I'll kind of circle back to that. That's an important piece to understand when you're approaching a VC. Fund cycle is important. Each fund is about a 7 to 10 year cycle. So as you get to the end of the funding cycle, if you are a strategic or financial VC, you're out fundraising, trying to get LPs to give you money again. If you are a CVC and you're investing off the balance sheet, you don't have a fund cycle, right? It comes with its own complications, but it's something to think about. VCs are set up differently, and this does fit a bit into the investment thesis of whether or not they lead, they follow, who they syndicate with. We tend not to lead. We tend to follow. We syndicate with all the top, Agtech funds in the world. I would say we share portfolio companies with just about everyone in the Agtech space, in part because we are so prominent. And that's the thing to kind of think about. VCs in many ways are not competitors. There's a lot of syndication. There's a lot of collaboration. And I think that's something that people maybe outside of Silicon Valley probably don't get to see as much, but VCs are a very collaborative bunch, which could be, I think, surprising on first thought. We're not like banks where we're trying to compete with each other.
So Evan, does that mean if you're not the lead typically on a deal, do you get less involved in the due diligence process? Do you trust the lead to do all that work and just trust that they're doing what they need to do?
Yeah, I'll speak generally on that one without kind of like saying what we do. Generally, yes. Generally, you are basically saying, if you are a follow-on investor, you're saying that the lead will take the brunt of the work to do the due diligence and set the terms. Valuations are a really hard thing to do with startups, and the lead investor kind of has to take on that brunt. As well as the due diligence. Due diligence is challenging, time consuming, and you get some benefits being the lead, and you also have to do a lot more work being the lead. So some funds only lead, some funds only follow. These are important things to think about. Some do both, right? So that's something to think about. Also, lead investors tend to want to take a board seat, which is time consuming long after the deal is done. Quarterly, you're sitting on the board, you're preparing for that board, you're going to the board of directors meetings. This is something that the lead investors have to consider, and then you have to consider that's something that's going to happen. You're going to give up board seats. That's important. I should also, kind of give a caveat here that every startup, every company is not a match for VC. You should really think long and hard before you start fundraising from VCs. Are we a business model that matches kind of venture funding? And
actually, Evan, that brings up a question that's in the Q&A. So Dan Melton is asking, does CVG invest in ag food that is not necessarily ag tech, or is your investment thesis hyper focused on ag tech?
Yeah.
And then also, I guess that brings about the sub question of, do VCs typically invest in ag food if there isn't an IP component or?
Yeah. So it would depend. It's a great question. I'll give kind of examples. So we do invest in food. Agri-food is how we would probably define it. But we wouldn't invest in a company that has it's like an innovative ingredient, or I'll use an example, right? I think there's a lot of companies coming up that do it's coconut milk ice cream. I saw a deal around that a while ago, and that's a perfect example. There are VCs that invest in that type of deal, but that doesn't fit into kind of our thesis. Where we can add value. We're looking for people who are trying to help folks grow and produce food, because that's who our network is. That's where we add value. That's where our expertise is. Not necessarily a food company. Another good example is people are using alternative proteins. Not not in the realm of like Impossible Food and Beyond Meat, but like in like crickets and like other kind of insect proteins. That's not an area where we can add a tremendous amount of value, but that is an area that VCs are investing in, if that makes sense. So hopefully that clarifies a bit.
Yeah, thank you.
But yeah, there are other funding mechanisms, and I think that's important to know. There are good things about taking VC money, and there are challenging things about taking VC money, and you should kind of go in eyes wide open. I will say. So what motivates a VC? I think this is really important. I think pulling back the curtain to VCs, if you're outside of the Bay Area, can be really advantageous for you if you are looking to fundraise. I think one of the advantages of being in the Bay Area is a lot of folks have friends who are VCs or formerly VCs, and you can kind of pick their brain and ask them questions. And you have people outside of that Bay Area bubble. It's a little bit of like a mystique, it's good to know when you're going to a pitch what is motivating a VC. The number one thing is financial. That is, we are investing on behalf, and I'll say this is aside from corporate venture, who have sometimes varying motivations. As a strategic or financial investor, you have a fiduciary responsibility to give a financial return for your LPs. They want to see that return. Venture capital, obviously, over the years has delivered a lot of returns for its LPs. Some of those LPs are things like the Cal State system or the University of California system, retirement funds. They have their LPs in different funds. It could be agricultural companies, it could be many things, high net worth individuals, but that financial return is important, right? We're going to take a big risk because we're hoping that some of our portfolio companies are going to be a huge return. Impact, this is not, this impact can mean.
Okay, sorry, can I ask you on the financial piece, ask you a quick question? So we often hear the classic range is we want to see $1 billion market. We want to see projections where you're going to be able to scale to hit 100 million revenue, annual revenue. So do you use the same type of range? It seems like that range hasn't changed in 10 years, but that seems to be the go-to.
I think that's like the easiest way to say it. And again, kind of speaking from my experience broadly across VC, I'd say that not every VC is thinking in that way. You can get a great return at, a $300 million acquisition or a $500 million acquisition. Ideally, you're IPOing at billions of dollars. That's great. But not every bet has to be that. But you do want to see, and I'll kind of get into this a little bit further, like you want to see the potential it's going to be a big company. And that's something you should consider when you're looking to get, if you want to fundraise from VCs. The fact of the matter is, as an entrepreneur, you can end up, having a very nice life and a great financial return for yourself, owning and running a multi-million-dollar company. It doesn't have to be worth, hundreds of millions. But if you want to take VC money, there has to be a pathway to that. The fact of the matter is, early stage companies, the vast majority of them are going to fail. So in order to kind of account for that in your portfolio, you have to have some that are going to go big. And maybe it's important to touch on here on that financial part before I move on to impact. How do VCs make money themselves? And the broad rule of thumb. This is not true for every fund, but the broad rule of thumb for financial VCs is what's called 2 and 20. So you build this fund, let's say it's a $100 million fund. You're going to charge your LPs 2% every year for a set amount of years to manage those funds. And then you're going to get 20% of the carry. So what that means is, if you're able to turn that $100 million fund into $200 million of value, the VC fund then takes 20% of that extra 100 million that you've produced in value. So that's an important thing to remember, that the management fees are not necessarily the main driver. The fund itself, to make serious money, needs to have big returns, because they're only going to get 20% of it. And those are, again, that's not every fund. has that 2 and 20, but that's like the general rule of thumb. I went to the VC training program that UC Berkeley does a couple of years ago, and like 2 and 20 is just kind of shorthand. That's, there's going to be different versions of that. But I think for most entrepreneurs, just know like that's kind of the motivation, right? Is they want to get that carried interest. That can be a good question to ask a CVC as well, because you want someone who's really driven to make you a very high value company. So you can ask a CVC what their compensation structure is, whether or not their investors are getting carry. You can just understand their motivation a little bit. So that's kind of the financial piece. Impact, that's important to us, right? We are looking at the future of food. Climate change and needing to feed more people with less resources, not polluting our water, not polluting our soil, depleting our soil, I should say, is important to us.
So Evan, question on that one. We have a question in the Q&A. So again, Dan Milton's asking, would CVG have any interest in a transportable vertical farm for communities in need of healthy, sustainable food source? So I think, if I recall some of the conversations I've had with him, this would be to, feed communities, in Africa or in third world countries or developing countries. And then my follow-on question to that is, being mission driven, sometimes you're not getting that financial piece with it, right? It's a bit of you take a hit on the financial to be able to focus on the mission. So how do you reconcile that as a fund and in the investment decisions that you're making?
Absolutely. And again, I'll kind of speak broadly here without assessing an individual deal for us, but I'll kind of speak broadly amongst kind of VCs in our world. The kind of term or idea of impact investor, I think it's like different people have different ideas of it. I'll kind of say my personal view of what an impact investor is. I would not consider ourselves impact investors. We are investing, we are mission driven, right? We're investing in agri-food companies. Climate and pollution and feeding the world is part of that. But we are investing for financial returns. There are impact investors, impact funds that are not necessarily looking for financial returns. They're looking to maximize impact. I think that an individual entrepreneur has to pick a lane and stay in that lane of which type of investor they're going to go after. We have an investment in Africa, right? In an African startup. We made a financial call on that, right? We believe in this startup. We think that, I do think that they're increasing their impact on the continent, particularly in the countries that they're operating. But we made a financial decision on them. We're not an organization that is making, what I think traditional impact investing looks like. We're expecting to get a return on that, and I hope that clarifies it a bit. Again, I don't want to say our approach to an individual deal, but hopefully it contextualizes it. I think my word of advice would be, be very intentional about what kind of investor you're targeting, and understand that every VC, even VCs that are focused on climate change or focused on Agtech, that if they're a financial investor and they have a responsibility to their LPs to return funds at a greater value than what they were given, that's great. And I think that provides a lot of value, and we're creating great companies, or we're supporting great companies. But I also think, on a personal level, it's important to have impact investors that's not part of the calculation. But those are two separate worlds, and I think that's important. So portfolio is one of our motivations. As a fund ages, there are different allocations for risk. There are different allocations for hardware versus software. As you get towards the end, you got to think about where they are along the commercialization route. If you're in the first year of your fund and you come across a company that you think it's going to take 10 years to kind of get to its exit, that's a bet you can take at that first year that you can't necessarily take at that 7th year, where you need to offload your fund. It needs to be mature at that kind of 10-year mark. Again, that's not us. That's kind of every VC from the financial VC perspective. So where they are in the fundraising cycle, and again, each fund has a different thesis. We are an investor of software, hardware. We're heavily invested in robotics. Some funds would never touch a piece of hardware like that. But some strictly strategic VCs maybe would do a bet like that in the first year, or maybe allocate 20% of their portfolio can be hardware, everything else doesn't have to be software, hoping that they're taking some risk on that hardware, but the software companies will scale and exit easier. Strategic, again, this could be kind of across the different funded, different types of VCs. If you have LPs, I'll use another example outside of us. There's a great VC that I worked with a lot that was an early investor in Tesla. It was like Fund One. They like Series A Tesla. A lot of their LPs are automotive companies, traditional OEM or automotive companies, and they're thinking about what companies are investing in that are going to help their LPs. It's all these motivating factors that can be thought about. And then fundraising. The goal of a fund manager at a VC is to ensure that they are able to raise their next fund. No one wants to be a single fund manager. They are going to have to go back to LPs, their current LPs and future LPs, and ask for more money. So performance of their portfolio is really important. Okay, so a little bit more on the thesis. I think this is really important. I love startups, I love connecting with startups. But when I started at SVG, I had a good friend who was a VC herself, and she was like, just wait, when you changed on LinkedIn that you're at a venture fund, you're just going to have everyone reach out to you, and none of them are going to be related to your fund. They're not going to fit within your thesis, and you're just going to have to say a lot of no's, and you're just going to be bombarded. And it's true. You get a ton of inbound, and you can tell that people haven't necessarily put a lot of thought into it. The investment thesis is really important. Everyone kind of play on margins of things, but it's important to know, like, if you approach a VC and you can fit in their thesis, that's important. If not, you're going to get a lot of no's from folks, in part because you're not a fit. And that's okay. It's not necessarily that you're not a great company, you don't have a lot of potential, but like, set yourself up for success and think about these 3 S's, sector, stage, and scalability. Are you the right sector? If someone came to us and they are they're trying to be like the Uber of dry cleaning, we are not the fund to invest in you. Like, that's completely out of our thesis. It would be a waste of your time and our time to chat with you. Stage, like, if you come to us and you are a Series C or D company, we're not going to invest in a company of that stage. Scalability, this kind of goes back to that impact investing piece. Like, we're not investing like a commercial bank is investing, or certain other funding mechanisms are investing to like create a good company that can last 100 years and be a $10 million company or a $30 million company. Those are really important in an economy, but that's outside of our thesis, right? So that's something really important to consider. So those are kind of like the big picture items. Hopefully that set the stage for kind of VC investing. And then I will kind of want to talk about a little bit the how individual deals are made. Again, like, this is informed from my own experience at SVG. This is also informed from my experience running an accelerator before that. We didn't invest in companies, but I was kind of helping companies fundraise, kind of putting together all of these pieces. This is a big one. I think that the first one for me is like a question I ask every time I look at a deck. That's informed because I come from the energy and clean tech space. And I think kind of clean tech 1.0 was a lot of this, right? Are you a solution in search of a problem? That is important to know, right? I want to know that you're actually solving a problem for a customer, and people are going to want to buy your product, whatever that product might be. I'll also take a step back here, sorry, and say, again, we have a focus in ag, food, climate influences that a lot of decks that I see, their problem slide is either climate change is the problem, or needing to feed a certain global population by 2050 with less land and less resources is the problem. Like, I get that that is a problem. I think everyone in the space gets that that's a problem. You don't have to reiterate that problem. So I use a good example of, like, if I was, when Tesla was raising their seed or their Series A, right? They wouldn't come to a VC and say the problem is climate change. They would say the problem is people want to buy electric vehicles and no one's making a cool electric vehicle. So I hope you can kind of, folks on the line, kind of see that distinction, right? Like, all of us know these kind of macro problems. Help me understand what the micro problem that you are solving for is. Like, and that is really important.
I love that you highlighted that. I run across that a lot too, and just figuring out what is the pain point for your buyer. All right, it's for the person who's going to give you money, not the world, world issue.
Yeah. I mean, I want to see that piece, but, like, you don't have to convince me that climate change is real. You don't have to convince me that it's hard to feed the global population. Like, that's why I'm doing these things. To your point, like, that's why I went to the Department of Energy. Like, you don't have to convince me of that problem. Like, help me understand, put the dots together, help me understand that you are solving a problem for your customer. Market size. This is important. I think can sometimes be frustrating to entrepreneurs. You could be a great solution, but if you're solving a problem for 1,000 people, you're not a VC investable company. You may be like a great company that can be built on more commercial or other type of funding. Go to a bank and take out a loan. If you're solving a very distinct problem for a local community, absolutely, there are other funding mechanisms. Being a VC-backed company is not the only metric of success. I will just say that. Like, we're just part of the puzzle of a broader economy. Competition, never go to a investor, I would say, and say there is no competition. Because if there's no competition, it means you're not really solving a problem that has a huge market. Tell us why your product is better, or your solution is better, or it's cheaper, or it's more scalable, but never say that there is no competition. That's a red flag on a number of ways. And how motivated are your customers? This is something that I really like to see. You're going to have to convince early adopters, and to do that, you are going to have to have some motivated customers. So help me understand that, right? When I'm looking at a deck. Traction. This is important. We're an early stage investor. Revenue is important for some types of technology. If you're a robotics company, we don't expect you to have revenue. If you're a hardware company, we don't necessarily expect you to have revenue. And this is true. I think I'm not just speaking for us. I think it's true for most funds. If you're a software company, if you're something that's like a little bit more scalable, the anticipation is that expectation, excuse me, is that you would have some sort of revenue, right? It's very different to scale an app than it is to scale a robot. I will say that. Second, traction can take a lot of forms. LOIs. Do you have an MVP? Do you have pilot projects? Have you secured grant money? I mean, this is great that we're online with Cal Poly, because things like SBIR grants, SCTR, like leverage grant money to do research at Cal Poly. I think highly upon that. Now, I'm a little biased. I was at DOE. We did a lot of these types of funding opportunities. Every investor, is probably different. Who are your investors? This is something that's very important to think about.
And I'm going to jump in, Evan, just to clarify the jargon. Sometimes we get so caught up. So LOI, letter of intent. So if someone has signed a letter that says they intend to purchase your product, or that they're interested in your product, that has a lot of value. An MVP, minimum viable product. So what's your product? Basically your prototype. And we do encourage our startups to be very lean in prototyping, so that they can then make corrections as they get feedback.
Absolutely, absolutely. Investors is important. I think. We with all humility, right? VCs probably love to think of themselves as kind of super innovative and leaders, but human beings have a herd mentality. When they see other folks investing, that's going to spur their interest. That's something to think about. I'll get to it, I think, later in my slides, but they're also, angel investors are really important, but can also be challenging, particularly how you structure those deals. I also am a firm believer, not so much in this role, but in my prior role. Angel investors often will a lot of them are just tire kickers. They want to talk to you forever. They want to do a ton of due diligence. They want to say, especially in the clean tech space, that they're investing in climate tech, and they're going to spend a ton of time with you and then write you a very, very small check, if they write you a check at all. So it's something to be thinking about. Angel investors are good to have there. They're not necessarily sophisticated investors. They're not going to have the same signaling effect as securing an STTR grant, to be quite honest. So something to think about. I stole this from someone who presented to my accelerator. This is something to be thinking about. If you haven't done a lean canvas exercise, definitely do it. Think through who your customer is, what your problem you're solving, how you're going to monetize that. I won't go into too much detail because there are a lot of resources online, and I want to have opportunity to answer questions. But be thinking through this. Do these thought exercises. There's a few more I'll talk about towards the end of thought exercises you can do. But team, I imagine we probably have mostly very early stage founders on the line today. Team is your asset, right? Who are your founders? Where have they worked? Your team slide should have some images of where they come from, things that are applicable. Some founders are going to be very experienced and have worked at major corporations across the globe. Put the ones that are most applicable on that slide. Advisors are a great way to round out a very new and young founder team, particularly if you're spinning out technology from a university. I personally, if I see an advisor from a university, I'll use a perfect example because I'm working with them now. I approached the animal science department at Cal Poly to work with some of our animal science startups. So if I were to see Dr. Nolan, the head of your department, as an advisor on a startup that was coming my way, I'd be like, oh, this is a validator, right? I'm not a scientist, I'm not a veterinarian, but if you can convince a researcher that is a specialist in this area to be an advisor, I think that is a great validator. And you want your founders to have a vision and drive. So be able to articulate that. I love when a founder in a pitch makes the story very personal. We have a company we just invested in that does monitoring of pig health, uses kind of cameras and AI to monitor the health of pigs and detect early disease, decrease mortality and the use of things like antibiotics. And the founders are multi-generational pig farmers who just happen to, be a young engineer that comes from a community that understands these problems, has been a pig farmer himself, and knows it. So I love seeing, make that personal connection. Tell me why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's really important. Your product, IP, very important. You should talk to an IP attorney. They are not necessarily cheap, but have some sort of protection. What's the user experience? Be prepared to do a demo. I think it's super important. Innovation, iteration. How are you going to continue to use your customer feedback to improve your product? Customer testimonials. We have one portfolio company that does such a great job of this. Every quarterly newsletter they send us, and I'm sure every other investor on their cap table, they have a different testimonial from a different customer. At the end of the day, I have a bit of an agricultural background. I spent my summers on an alfalfa farm in rural Idaho, family farm. My family owned a honey company, son of a beekeeper. So I understand certain things in ag, but if you're, a technology that is doing row crops, I don't, I know as an outsider perspective, but if you're telling me a customer testimonial of someone who does it, who loves your product, that is a great hook. So something to think about. Almost done with my portion. This is kind of my brain dump here at the end. Things to consider. These are really important. Good governance. this could absolutely kill a deal. You know, particularly, I know we have some folks on the line who are raising from some angel investors. What are the terms of that? Everyone should be able to go on YC's. I'm sure most folks are going to raise in a safe, right? Everyone should be able to go to YC and pull their safe, which is, you know, in the Bay Area, I'd say early stage companies are almost exclusively raising on that, on those terms. Have really standard deals. Don't go into like really intricate deals with some poison pills in them. That's something to think about. Make sure you've, you know, incorporated correctly. Make sure you've built your cap table correctly. All these things are kind of mundane, but if you are an early stage company and you give me access to your data room to do due diligence, and it's like very well organized, it has all of the things you need, that's a really good a good thing. Something to definitely be careful of. Don't sign on to bad terms. I will also give a caveat to this is I think a lot of founders want to have the highest valuation they possibly can. The worst thing you can do is convince an unsophisticated investor to give you too high of a valuation that a sophisticated investor is not going to want to give you. And you have to raise a down round or they just won't touch it. Like, you can go to an angel investor and convince them maybe that you're a $10 million company and that's your angel round. Then you got to convince your pre-seed or seed investor that you're a $20 million company. That's hard to do. So as much as you don't want to give up, you know, you want to say, oh, we're a $15 million company, we're a $10 million company. If you convince unsophisticated investors to overvalue you, that's going to be really, really hard. And something to think about. You never want to raise a down round. You want to be really realistic about your valuation. Don't just tell me where you're going to be. Remember that Google was once a $1 million valuation or $2 million valuation. So you can get there in the long run, but don't shoot yourself in the foot. Hire good attorneys. I'll say that. If I was starting and I get to this at the bottom of service providers. If I was starting a startup, there are certain attorneys I would 100% use, certain banks I would 100% use for their network and their expertise. Long-term relationships, VCs love saying that the average VC relationship is longer than the average marriage in the state of California. This person's going to be with you for 7 to 10 years. I've had VCs presenting to some of my accelerators talk about how, like, I think about in my pitch, you know, when I'm receiving a pitch, like, am I going to have to be on the phone with this person on like Christmas Eve or, you know, a family holiday, trying to help them because they don't know what they're doing. Like, I'm going to be with this person for 7 years. Are they not nice? Do I think they'll be like abusive to their employees? These are real considerations. Are they going to listen to me? Are they coachable? These are things to think about. That kind of feeds into humility and hunger. You know, I want to see a hungry startup. I think anyone in this space wants to see a hungry startup, but have humility. The best relationships with the VC should not be adversarial. The VC has a vested interest in you, and you should be able to kind of leverage their networks, their expertise, like listen to them, and be humble, be nice. VCs 100% talk to each other, and they share deal flow. If you're a seed investor, you're passing along your portfolio companies to Series A investors, and they're not going to do that if they have a bad relationship with you. Remember that that a lot of VCs anticipate a certain percentage of loss in their portfolio. So if you're really challenging the biggest piece, particularly these days, which is a good thing, like if you're abusive to your employees, if you are not a good person, if you're doing things that are nefarious, like that's gonna kill you. Kill your company, as it should. Incubators and accelerators. I'm an accelerator manager. I ran this accelerator, ran an accelerator before. I think really highly of incubators, of accelerators. Utilize them at the right time. Great signaling effects, and great lessons learned. Storytelling and a polished pitch. Be a great storyteller. Like, you got to remember that a lot of VCs are hearing, multiple pitches a day. They're looking at multiple decks a day. I hate to say it, but you know, your deck has to look good. It has to jump out at you. It's hard to kind of see you know, a company for what it is if it's not polished, if someone's not telling a compelling story. One piece of advice I love giving founders is before you send a pitch deck, you should have two pitch decks. First of all, one you're presenting on, and one you're sending to someone either as a read ahead or to get their interest. Those should look different. Like you know, when we're reviewing applications for Accelerator, right, you know, you don't necessarily have a ton of time for each deck. And if there are blank slides that clearly were meant to be narrated over, you've missed the opportunity to express that to me because I'm reading it without you pitching it directly to me. So make sure there's enough, you know, you're connecting the dots. You know, find someone that you really like and respect, that you know well, a smart person, but doesn't know what you do, and send them your deck. You know, find your cousin or you know, another entrepreneur, send them your deck, and then get on a call with them and ask them questions that you would hope that the investor would be able to answer. Ask them like, what is my product? If they can't answer that, the VC probably can't answer that. What problem am I solving? If they can't answer that, the VC probably can't answer that. You know, it's surprising how many decks you come across and you can read and you have no idea what that person is doing, no idea what their product is, and no idea what their customer is. And they made it to you. It's very hard sometimes to like get to the VC to have them read your deck, and they've wasted that opportunity because they're so familiar with their company. They don't know what you don't know. So use that. Comparative strengths, you know, I think particularly for folks outside of Silicon Valley, likely your valuations are going to be lower, your labor costs are going to be lower. That can be a good thing. Utilize that. Investor due diligence, this is important too. You know, I think that it comes from a very privileged point of view when a lot of folks who have successfully fundraised will say like, oh, these are certain questions you should ask an investor. These are the diligence you do on the investor. You know, it's true to some degree. It's easier to do that when you have a bunch of people giving you term sheets. But again, don't get yourself in bed with somebody who does not believe in you, does not have the right network for you, doesn't have the dry powder to continue funding you if they are a lead investor and want, you know, kind of continue at a pro rata. Reach out to portfolio companies, ask them what it was like to get investment dollars from them. And then service providers. Again, I've been in the accelerator space for a while. There's like one law firm. If I started a startup tomorrow, they would be my first visit. I would have them incorporate me. I would have them do my like docs. You know, I like my bank of choice would be Silicon Valley Bank because they understand startups. They have a network of their own. They're going to help you. I wouldn't go to a bank that doesn't have, you know, kind of a product class for startups, that doesn't have a network for startups. All these things are really important and things to think about.
So that was actually one of the questions we had in the chat. Someone was asking how the importance of these banks and what exact value do they provide if you do pick the right ones. So Silicon Valley Bank, how have you seen them actively support a startup beyond just you know, a loan or a line of credit?
I think there are things that they can't promise that they'll do, but they often do. So I won't like you know, put them on the hook to say they can do this every time. But no, they have a vested interest in you being not just a pre-seed company or not just an angel round company. They want you to be a big company. So they have other clients that could be your customers, or other clients that could be your investors. They can make connections. They can coach you. You know, a lot of them are making early bets too. This is true with law firms. You know, really prominent law firms often will waive fees for early stage founders because they don't care necessarily about the fees at your seed. They want to take your fees when you're like raising a Series B or Series C or Series A when it's much larger. And you know, just expertise and comfort in how they value things. You know, some of them have venture debt which you can take. They just understand what it means to raise money. I think really highly of local banks as like a philosophical point of view. I think local banks are really important for entrepreneurship, but if you are a startup that's trying to raise VC money, it's a different kind of world. And going with someone who specializes in that area is important. So my last slide is for questions. I put my email address up there. I'd say like, I love startups, love answering questions. But it's important to remember, like if you're not a kind of a company that would fit in our accelerator, it is going to be a bit of, is it a good use of your time for us to get on the line to do a pitch? No, I will say if you're a clean tech company that's outside of our scope, if you're a clean tech company, reach out to me. I'll chat with you on my personal time. I still care a lot about clean tech, have deep experience in energy. That is not, a product of my current role, but, reach out. Happy to give you advice, especially at this early stage, let you pick my brain. Happy to do it, provide value where I can. So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Evan, in the Q&A. So and actually I was going to ask that question too, but I think I knew the answer. But does SVG invest in Agtech companies that don't go through the accelerator? And so I know you do look at decks outside of the startups that are in your program.
Yeah. Generally speaking, the general rule of thumb is we invest in companies that go through our accelerator.
Okay.
We invest in them at the beginning. It's not like some models where you're competing for an investment. We invest in the companies that are going through the accelerator. It's the best way to get investment from us. I don't want to, I don't, that would be a decision, outside of the accelerator is a decision that is beyond me. I don't want to say like absolutely yes or no, but generally the rule of thumb is to go through our accelerator. I think there are other avenues, but that's kind of beyond my pay grade.
Okay. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah.
I think, we only have a few minutes left. Maybe just one last question. People always want to hear about success stories. So since you've been with SVG and Thrive, do you have one particular success story that you want to share so we can end on that note?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say that I've been here for 3 months. So success stories in these types of technologies can take longer. But what I will say is my prior accelerator that I worked for has invested 3 of the companies that went through that program got investment and went through the accelerator program with Thrive. So to me, that was a huge success, passing them on to an investor. I think that a program like Thrive is, provides a tremendous amount of value. We're not trying to like do the education piece where we're teaching how to write a business plan or put together your deck. We're connecting you with commercial results. And we've had a large number of successes. I'll give a plug for SVG, which again is to no credit of me because this has been around a lot longer than I've been with Thrive. Over 95% of our companies are still around. I know of no other early stage accelerator that has that type of statistic. That is, as someone who's been in the accelerator space for a while, that's like, I'm blown away by that. Especially when you consider that like we're investing in things like hardware, robotics.
That's super impressive. That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's something to consider, when you're thinking about coming onto an accelerator or taking an investor, even if it's not the terms that you would love, if you see something like that, you got to know like, hey, there's something here. That's another reason why I really believe in accelerators. That's the space that I'm in. But most folks, even in the digital space, the pure software space, couldn't boast a 95% success rate over 7 cohorts, right? Or survival rate, I should say. And we've had huge success.
Awesome. Yeah. We're close behind you. We're at 80%.
That's incredible. That is absolutely incredible when you think about the stage that where you are, where you're meeting these companies before they're probably always even having a solid idea of what their business plan is. The fact that 80% survived, again, like you got to think about that and be like, that is super impressive. Clearly, you have a secret sauce. You're convening the right people and you're teaching the right lessons. And I think, that's why I appreciate being here.
Vice versa. Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Evan, thank you so much. It was just wonderful having you with us this morning. Great opportunity to focus on Agtech and talk a bit, get a bit more in the weeds on that. Thank you, thank you. We will have a recording. This has been entirely recorded, so the recording is available, and we will share to our other, the rest of our community, startup community. And we have a couple slides just to wrap up of upcoming events. We have an awesome webinar that's available on demand about remote working. It was provided, we ran it with Lori as our facilitator. She's the keynote speaker, and she gives just tremendous, spot on advice on how to work best with your remote team. Lots of great tips. So that's available. The link is right there. You can email us, to request the link as well if that's necessary. Then we have the QuickBooks desktop workshop, May 21st, with our expert Damon Watkins. And the link for that is in the chat, actually. The link to the remote working webinar and the QuickBooks registration link is in the chat. And our big annual event, don't miss it. June 10th, we have AngelCon 2021. We have 6 startups that are competing for $130,000 in equity funding from our angel group. And the event is on June 10th. Tickets are available on the at angelcon2021.eventbrite.com. It's a really awesome event, so please join us for that. The top 6 startups are quite impressive, and we're stoked to be able to support them. And that's it from us this morning. Join us next month for another session of Coffee and Conversation. Until then, have a great day, and thank you. Goodbye.